Read me. Let's get straight into that. I used to narrate stories for the pleasure of those that frequented my podcast. I told all sorts of scary stories, funny, magical thrillers, and even true stories. And I would get submissions from my listeners, and they would get to vote on what the next week's tale would be. My little program aired on Sunday evenings. It was called A Place in Time with Robert Zephyr, and my listeners would be taken to another dimension, not unlike the Twilight Zone. I had gotten into narrating after 20 years on stage. I was nearing 65 years old, and the stage had become too political, and I didn't fit in with the in crowd any longer. There were so many up-and-coming actors that I finally took my opportunity to retire from the stage and focus on enjoying my life. And after raising my young daughter as a single father, she was now off having a family of her own, so my listeners became my adopted family. Over the years I had met many fine people. One such person was a young actress, Julia Wilmington, and she was a deep southerner, and her accent made me think of Vivian Leigh in Gone with the Wind or Streetcar Named Desire. And she rang me up one afternoon to let me know that she had sent me a package from her recent travels to Morocco. "Robert, tell me," she began in that deep southern drawl, "how have you been keeping yourself?" "Oh, keeping up with the Joneses." "Well, you should love the gift I sent you. I just got a text that the package arrived in the last half hour. Check your mailbox," Julia said to me in a tone that I knew I had better, or I'd be getting an earful. I walked out the narrow driveway, and at the very end of my long drive was the old black mailbox. I reached inside and pulled out a rather hefty package. "What on earth did you send me? Is it a brick?" I joked. "No, you silly old man. Open it. I'm just so excited for you to see it." I ripped the flimsy package in, and when I did, it was a large mahogany book. It looked ancient and looked as if it was dipped in some sort of red sticky candy. "Oh, a book." I tried to sound enthusiastic. "Open it." I opened it, and the words "Read me" scrolled inside as though someone had written them with an old ink pen, the sort you had to dip in ink with a feather. "Well," she asked, "did you see it? Clever, isn't it?" "There's nothing written in it," I said, flipping through the pages. "It is a fun joke, Robert. I couldn't help but buy it. Some old hag nearly tackled me to death when I bought it, and you know how foreigners are. Always superstitious of us Americans. Joke's on them. I got to it first. Don't you like it?" she asked, finally inviting me to get a word in. "It is very clever, Julia. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I will add it to my collection of items you have sent me over the years." "Okay, I'll call you next week and we'll have dinner. I should be home by then unless I lose my passport." Julia laughed in that deep husky way and then hung up the phone. I looked down at the thick book. What a waste of paper to have this old thing but never have anything written in it. My hands were now sticky from whatever had eased its way out of the creases of the book. I sat the book down on my desk and went to wash my hands. I wiped my hands with a kitchen towel, and then my eyes went towards my desk and the book. It was now wide open, and I didn't recall leaving it open. I walked over to the book slowly. The pages were blank, and as I closed the book again, I accidentally cut myself on the corner of one of the pages. I had stung something horrible. I had paper cuts in the past, but nothing quite as painful as this. Instinctively, I put my index finger up to my mouth and sucked on it. The blood was gushing from it, and it was such a small cut. Some blood had dripped onto the book, and the book flipped open, all by itself. I stood back in awe, not entirely understanding what I was witnessing. Perhaps I was in shock from looking at the blood. I leaned in towards the book's open page, and without realizing it, my bloody finger dripped onto the blank page. I was about to get a band-aid when I looked down, and there, suddenly on the book, appeared on the blank pages. They spread out and formed sentences to what looked like instructions. I held my finger absent-mindedly as more blood dripped down onto the counter. And soon the book was sucking in every ounce of blood from where it was leaking blood. And soon pages of the book turned in a quick motion until the book closed. And when it did, it took a deep breath. Yes, I said it, a deep breath. And to my shock, my finger was no longer in pain and bleeding. But then I was not sure if I was seeing things or not. Maybe it hadn't taken a deep breath. And suddenly, a rather disgusting beetle crawled out from under it. It made its way towards me, and then another followed. And then maggots, and then the book opened up to the first page that said, "Read me." There was a permeating smell of death that came out of it that was indescribable. I took a deep breath, nearly ready to pass out from shock when I read what it said. Inside you will find the souls of many who lost their way. Read more, else you too shall lose your way. It isn't hard. Simply pick me up and tell our stories. When each story is read aloud, we will go back to where we came. Warning: if you finish each story as instructed, after each story you will receive a gift. Failure to finish the book, all gifts will be taken back and your soul will remain inside the book. For who shall ever bring us to life to tell our stories, so we can be free with his or her life force, will remain ours forever. I wanted to throw up. I had never experienced anything like this in my life. I was nearly 65 years of age and had never had a hallucination quite like this. I sat down on my desk chair and took a very long and deep breath. I rubbed my forehead and scratched my chin. I was nearly afraid to read the pages, but I was more afraid not to. I decided that I would read the story, but I would do one better. I would record the information as written and air it for this week's upcoming podcast as a special show. I leaned in and read the title of the first chapter. The Ski Trip. I wasn't expecting this to be the first title. I expected something dark and magical for a book that could drink blood and breathe, and so I read on. The Ski Trip. My name is Michael. My story begins with a relatively normal beginning. My wife Sylvia and I decided to take a rather romantic trip to the mountains for Valentine's Day. We stayed at a beautiful lodge overlooking a frozen lake. It was picturesque, to say the least. It was a perfect Hallmark Christmas card, or one of those paintings by Norman Rockwell. A pretty little New England town at the edge of one of the coldest winters we had ever seen. The blizzard came fast and, instead, unexpectedly. Yes, it was winter, February, to be exact. I guess I wasn't much of a planner. I had planned the trip all by myself without Sylvia's help for once, as a surprise. And I wasn't much of a skier, but my Sylvia loved every minute of it. The first day we were at the Cascade Mountain Lodge. I planned a romantic dinner with her and we made plans to wake up early and hit the mountains. And it was the perfect way to start. Romance by the fireplace, hot chocolate, and a steamy hot tub. The next morning, we had to take a shuttle to the far end of the mountain, where the best skiing was, and I held my beautiful wife's hand when the shuttle hit a large bump and then stopped moving altogether. "Is everything all right?" I asked the driver. "Oh, I have to get out and take a look. Think a tire went flat. That was a pretty big chunk of ice we hit." I sighed and rubbed Sylvia's back. She seemed nervous about the fact we were now one of the 6 strangers stranded on this mountain, in a shuttle that could no longer move us to where we needed to go. The driver inspected the damage and then opened the door. "Looks like we'll have to hike it the rest of the way, and then one of our other shuttles can pick you up just before sundown. It is only half a mile up that hill. Luckily for us, we were almost there, when Bertha took a dump. Colourful language, I thought to myself. Regretfully, we all gathered our things, and the driver acted as our tour guide up the mountain. One thing I had not counted on was the fact that the wind was so strong it nearly knocked me over. It was brutal, and my poor Sylvia was crouched over so that the wind did not hit her in the face directly. Now we walked some ways up the hill, and then the blizzard from hell caused a whiteout like none I had ever experienced. The wind was deafening, and while it was not loud, the chill scraped across what little parts of my face remained exposed. I grabbed a hold of Sylvia and made sure I had her in my grasp so that we would not lose one another. And we walked and walked for what seemed a very long while before I yelled to the driver. "Shouldn't we have reached the top of the mountain by now?" "I'm sorry. The whiteout got us a bit turned around. I'm familiar with the area, so no worries." The driver tried to calm us. And after another long while, we got towards a clearing, and the wind died down. We walked towards a large patch of evergreens, and when we got in between them, the driver took out a walkie-talkie. "This is Dan. You copy?" I waited for a response, but nothing but static remained. "Do you think maybe we should turn back? If it is this bad, I don't think I want to ski anymore," Sylvia said. Just then, a few more of the riders from the shuttle caught up with us. "I think we're facing north. My compass says so, anyhow." And the driver looked up at him, and the growing concern on his face was telling. "I think we better stay put. Compasses have a way of not working where we are. There's a magnetic field up here that causes glitches with equipment now and then. If we stay put, we can make our way up the mountain once this storm blows over. And it always does." He smiled reassuringly. And the gentleman stood in front of us and seemed every bit as concerned as the rest of us. We were lucky to find some shelter amongst the trees, but a part of me wished that perhaps we had planned a different getaway trip. "Next year, we will be going on a trip to the Bahamas," I said to myself. And we stood amongst the trees when we noticed the sun was now peeking through the whiteout, and the wind had died down. I went to step down, and when I did, I fell into a hole the size of myself. In shock, the rest of the group was able to get me up, but when they did, the ice and snow beneath me had caved in, and a much deeper cavern appeared. It was like a snowy sinkhole. I clutched onto the shuttle driver as he and 2 other men pulled me up to safety. And when I was standing up again, I hugged Sylvia. And the wind died down, and we were all finally able to get a good look around us. We were nowhere near the mountain we needed to be atop of. Instead, it looked as though we were in the middle of a deep forest of trees that seemed to float above icy cliffs. Every move would have been calculated, and from our vantage point, we each tried to see if we could see the ski resort. And there was nothing in sight for what looked like miles. It was as if we had stepped into another dimension. The gentleman with a compass, whose name I learned was John, took out his compass, and instead of facing any direction, it merely spun out of control. And John and I realized that we had been in this forest for what seemed like hours, and the sun was beginning to dwindle among more storm clouds. We had no choice but to keep on moving, and the shuttle driver kept on trying to reach one of the rangers for assistance, yet to no avail. We were alone. 2 women in their 20s offered us snacks while we waited, and I was grateful for what little nourishment they provided, even if it was in Cheetos guise. I was mostly worried about Sylvia now, who had grown quiet. I knew she was scared to death, but we had to keep on going. And we all voted on trekking up the most prominent mountain, as there had to be a better vantage point to where we were. We all seemed to be in a strange sort of daze too. I can't explain it. We all followed along a single file line, up the hills and through the dense forest of evergreens, and we were walking again for what seemed forever, when suddenly I felt boiling. I didn't understand why, considering the temperatures were way beneath 28 degrees, and I began taking off bits of clothing and wiping sweat from my brow. Sylvia began to complain of a headache, and the two women that were with us began wailing as they clutched their ears. "Don't you hear that booming?" one of them yelled at me. I heard a faint sound in the distance that sounded like drums, and my mouth was now going dry as well. Still, that drumming went on. I felt like my mouth was going to fall off my face. The numbness didn't make sense because I no longer felt the sting of frostbite. John then looked at me with a terrifying look on his face. The drumming seemed to get louder and louder, and as I looked down at his hands, they were now bent backwards. They were broken as if something had twisted them one by one. And soon we were all in pain from some illness or another. And that drumming, it was growing louder still. Sylvia crying is the last thing I recall. The worst was seeing her. The ice froze her body stiff as though pressing paws on her. My mouth failed to work when I tried to scream. The drumming was louder now, and as the sound reverberated through my bones and body, it seemed to chip away at parts of my body. I collapsed to the ground, unable to move, as I felt every bone in my body breaking. And still, that sound. I was the only one now watching as the light went out in my eyes. I don't know if I was hallucinating, but I felt my tongue as it fell to the ground. It lay in the icy snow. I felt no pain, nothing. And I was in the ice and snow for days, an eternity. My ghost watched on as my body turned blue like a lobster. My eyes were frozen open and were crystallized over, white like the snowy winter that had taken our lives. And that sound in a forest had killed us all. What was that sound? What power did it hail? There was something primal about it. The darkness inside of it was worse than that of an atomic bomb. Yet it is now your gift, reader. Now they will know what became of us and no longer wonder. I read the end of this man's life. I hit stop on my recorder and sighed. As I did so, I watched the words of the page lift off and fly out of the book. Relief fell over me as I felt the sorrow from these people leaving my body. It was as though they needed me to tell their tales to release them into the nether world. It felt good seeing the story of their last days being told so that someone out there knew what happened to them. Instinctively, I knew that they had to be waiting for someone to tell their story. The words written in blood went back into my cut on my index finger, and as they did, I felt a surge of energy run through my body. I took a deep breath. "Holy shit," I said out loud. As I spoke, my words vibrated my entire house. One of the wine glasses I kept in the kitchen cracked. My voice sounded as though it were a drum, like thunder in the sky. I thought of the story I had read, the sound that had caused such damage. Was this going to be my new gift? They said after retelling each story, I would inherit a gift. When I looked down at the book and the blank pages and found myself turning a page to the next story. I stopped at the title. Ripping Flesh. I could go no further for now. I would wait until I had more energy. Suddenly, I was growing quite tired and in need of rest. Rest assured, I will return soon. I just need a rest before I continue. Robert. Wow. Certainly another one. Wow. What an absolutely interesting, thought-provoking and spine-tingling story. Of course, a huge thank you to the author, BlackFridaysWitch13, over on Reddit No Sleep, for allowing me to narrate this incredible series. Certainly one of the most refreshing writers I think I've found this year. And I really look forward to more of your work in the future. And of course, I hope you enjoy my rendition. Guys and girls as ever, you know the drill. Please let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid Crew. If you're an aspiring writer or would just like to have a crack at things like myself, then please do get in touch with me at the brand new contact email, which is, as on screen, contactthedeadone@gmail.com. I really look forward to hearing from you. As ever guys, I hope you're all well and happy, fighting fit and taking a fight back to life. But above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.